All right, Aaron, are you ready?
For what?
Well, it's our new segment.
What?
Yeah.
Wait. I'm looking at my format sheet right now. I don't see anything about new segment.
You don't have a format
But
sheet.
this,
Come on.
but we don't have a format on this show?
No, there's never a real format. It's our new segment. It's called Lawless in Order, and the reason is we're going to start examining some of the most ridiculous wrestling storylines in history and kind of figure out what would happen if there's a justice system in place for these wrestlers. And we're going to do that with my good friend, the gavel, David Lawless, attorney and pro wrestler. David, how are you?
Excellent, gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us and really examine the hard-hitting cases throughout professional wrestling history.
Pardon the interruption.
Okay.
Aaron Bauer here. David, if I can call you David, if that's okay.
That's fine, sir.
Well, you're the sir, really. Now, I just want to let you know that I've been through a lot of divorces, and I plan on going through a lot more. Like, would I be able to hire you for my services needed to divorce these women and not have them take half of my shit?
Well, I would say you should hire a lawyer before you get married to them, because then they could get a prenup for you.
Oh, see, this is already paying off. Love the segment.
Right?
Yeah, let's go, baby.
David,
But I would wonder the what women would want to get involved with you after you've been divorced multiple times and probably have half of an eighth of something.
I'm irresistible, though. I can't help it.
Okay.
You're not even getting money for the podcast. It's going to your ex-wives, right?
That's right.
David, I've known you for a couple years now.
Yeah.
You're a pretty great professional wrestler, and you are a real-life lawyer. Give the people a little bit about your backstory and how one decides, instead of just wrestling in a court of law, you're going to professionally wrestle in life.
Well, yeah, so I graduated law school in 2010, and I started my practice. About 5 years into my practice, I decided that I was going to pursue my lifelong dream of becoming a professional wrestler, which I was inspired, like most people, after seeing the 1, 2, 3 Kid beat Razor Ramon on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
Great moment.
Literally, the first time I turned on professional wrestling was like right towards the end of the match when he hits the moonsault and pins Razor Ramon. And I was just like, I was hooked from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I would have been 8, I think,
Okay.
when I saw that.
Okay.
So it's funny because there's a couple people that I grew up with that we watch wrestling, and their parents are like, "Oh, I think you owe me a couch now," or, I think you owe me some money for some paint in the walls from, tossing people around. So, so what happened was, I went to college, I went to law school. It takes a lot of time, and you're very busy. I started to kind of let myself go a little bit, got out of shape, and was more focused on my career and on studies. I started getting in shape once I had a handle on practicing law and wasn't as busy. And I noticed that there were a lot of people in the profession that were just unhappy. Individuals that had kind of done what everyone does, go to school, get a degree, get married, have kids, and really never took a time to do anything for themselves or focus on their dreams. So when I was 30, I thought to myself, I'm getting in better shape. It's now or never.
Wait, so you started when you were 30?
Yes, 30 years old was when I first went to wrestling school.
Yikes. I bet that had to hurt more than, like I started when I started training when I was 19.
Yeah.
Greg, how old were you?
19.
Yeah. So like we had 11 years on you, if my math is correct. And,
yeah, that would be 11 years.
Yeah. And that should hurt. But at 30, I can't imagine just starting it. That's unbelievable.
I look at it two ways. I mean, I think if I would have started training when I was in my 20s or my mid 20s, I don't know that I would have taken it as seriously. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I like diet, exercise, focus. I was very fortunate that the training class that I had. So my training class was Lee Moriarty and Duke Davis.
Okay.
We all started training at the same time.
I don't know the other guy.
Duke's in the main event tag team.
Gotcha.
And so the three of us were just like dedicated to wrestling. We weren't, we kind of had the immaturity out of us. We got there, we would work out, we would do our lessons, we would learn. and then we would just study. And so I think starting at a later age, and especially coming from the background of being a lawyer, I was able to really approach it from a more scientific standpoint, as opposed to like, hey, I'm 19 or 20 years old, I'm going to wrestling school and I think I'm the shit, and I'm kind of sowing some of my wild oats throughout that time.
Yeah. And now what did people, rational people in your real life think when you go from like this secure, very adult-like profession of being a lawyer to, I'm also going to do this like pro wrestling thing?
So there was a lot of head scratching. Like, people couldn't really understand it. And, I think some people were jealous because they envied the fact that I was getting the opportunity to actually live out, one of my dreams. And when people saw the damage that it did, I mean, fortunately, I've never sustained a major injury, but, I've had my head split open. I've gone through some ladders and some tables. So I don't think people get it, but then when they understand the passion that I have and the entertainment value that it offers to people, I think they really appreciate it. Yeah. And, I got into it never expecting. It's almost like a drug. I'm sure you guys can appreciate this. Where
I can.
Yeah, especially since Darren has done a plethora of drugs.
Not recently, not in years, but yeah, in the past.
We'll put that in the prenup too. No drugs. So, but no, you get in, and all I wanted to do was learn to wrestle. I wanted to get in the ring and figure out, how do I do this? And then after you figure out how to do it and you start learning the psychology of professional wrestling, then it's like, I want to have my first match. And then after your first match, you want to keep growing and growing and growing, and you just want more, But wrestling to me was never going to be a full-time job, or it wasn't going to be anything that would take over my practice. It was just something that I wanted to do. When I say for fun, I don't want people to think that I don't treat the wrestling business seriously. Greg, that I take it very seriously.
Would you say more like, instead of fun, personal satisfaction?
Yeah, it was a personal goal. I mean,
right.
The thing is, when I do anything, I throw myself in 100%. So, I took the approach to wrestling just like I did with my studies in law school and even my practice, where, if I wasn't in the ring and I wasn't working, I was watching wrestling and I was studying. And I had the benefit of having a fantastic trainer, Brandon Kay, who's been wrestling for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And he was a great person to learn from. And then actually, if you guys know Chris LaRusso.
Yes.
Yep.
Chris was we graduated law school the same year.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris was one of the people that helped me early in my training too.
That's awesome. And now, did you ever think that you were going to take what you learned in the court of law and apply it to the squared circle?
Well, actually, it's funny you should mention that, because there's a great parallel between being a lawyer and being a professional wrestler, because it's all storytelling.
That's very true. When you state it like that, it's really true.
It's all storytelling. And I think one of the reasons why I was able to be somewhat successful early on in my career was I had a very well-developed character. I could cut really good promos, and, my athleticism, I'm never going to outwork someone as far as like moves are concerned and as far as athleticism is concerned, but I could tell a good story with my promos, and I could always, kind of sell people on the character. So it was easy for me to take that part of being a lawyer and translate that to being a professional wrestler. I mean, when you think about it, storytelling is the crux of everything you do. Whether it's going on a job interview, whether it's going on a date, you're trying to convey your message in a way that's digestible to the person that you're interacting with. So if it's, telling a story in the ring, once you have the outline of, all right, what story are we telling? How are we going to accomplish that with the fans?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's why I contacted you about doing this segment on the podcast, because I knew that you would be able to bring the knowledge necessary to the table to be able to answer the hard-hitting questions when it comes to law and professional wrestling. And I think today we're going to start out with a hot one. I think, I don't know the perfect way to say this. Would it be Triple H versus the McMahon family?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we're going to go back to November 29th, 1999, a very special day, one would have thought, for Andrew Martin, but it ends up being a particularly special and interesting day for one Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Do you want to help me go back in time here, David?
Yeah, so apparently Andrew Martin was supposed to marry Vince McMahon's daughter live on Monday Night Raw, because where would be a better place to have a wedding than on live television?
Of course.
And so during the ceremony, it was interrupted by Triple H, who revealed to the McMahon family that Stephanie would be unable to marry Andrew Martin because she had already been married to Triple H.
Yes, we all know the famous situation. Triple H took her through that little wedding chapel in Las Vegas, Nevada, while she was, quote, sleeping in the car there. We all know that during the
bachelorette
party, she was supposedly drugged, and then Triple H took advantage of the situation. And just before she was to get married to Andrew Martin, she ended up getting married to Triple H, thus allowing him to interrupt the wedding because, as we recall, no one other than family members were allowed to be a part of the wedding. That's why Triple H had that loophole there, because he married Stephanie. And then we all wondered, not did he, but how many times did he consummate the marriage? And so, with that being said, Mr. Lawless, what kind of charges, if this were to be actually put into the court of law, what type of situation are we looking at as far as Triple H versus the McMahon family?
So we actually, this is just chock full of criminal charges, civil allegations, and there's even an orphan/estate claim that could be made here. So let's take them one by one here, okay? In the criminal context, okay, you would not only be able to charge Triple H with battery, which is an unlawful and unconsented to touching.
That just sounds wrong.
You would also be able to charge him with conspiracy because he had actually hired the bar. So you would have the bartender and him as the defendants.
Okay.
And that would be where the conspiracy and fraud came in. You would then have him for battery, which would be the unconsented to touching by Stephanie McMahon, which would come in the form of kissing her and also drugging her.
Sure.
You would then have a charge for, it would be fraud, and it would be fraud for entering into, because marriage is a legally recognized contract. So it would be a claim for fraud that he had purposely drugged her to get her into the marriage.
Okay. Is that it?
In the criminal context, you possibly could get him for, it would probably be the bartender for possession of a controlled substance, depending on what it is they used to drug her. But the bartender would also have at least battery, if not assault and battery charges against it.
I got to ask you something. What charges would come to would be brought against Stephanie McMahon?
Well, technically there would be nothing against Stephanie McMahon because she was not conscious at the time that it was done.
Okay,
so she would not be responsible for her actions.
You could tell she wanted it.
Okay. You can't say that in 2020. Okay.
Okay. No.
You shouldn't say that at all, ever.
No. Okay. No. Seriously though, Stephanie, at a later date, turned against Mr. McMahon, her own father.
Okay. So hold on.
And aligned with Triple H and revealed that they were in cahoots together the whole time. Cahoots, I tell you.
Okay. So wait. So before we go to that, let's think about it like this though. Let's pretend like Stephanie never reveals that she's in on the situation or that she ended up falling for Triple H.
Right.
Let's go by what happened, the whole thing with Triple H and the bartenders. What do you think the sentence would look like?
Ooh, well, man. Every state's different. So the other question would be, where would Triple H be charged, right? Because if the bachelorette party happened in, let's say, Arizona, and then Triple H transported her to Las Vegas. Now you've got federal criminal charges because you have an interstate conspiracy.
Yeah.
Um,
and the wedding happened in Los Angeles. Or the wedding that was about to happen between Test and Vince that happened in Los Angeles.
Test and Vince.
Test and Stephanie.
Right.
That happened in Los Angeles.
So the question becomes where are the crimes committed, right? Because technically, if you're saying that Triple H committed a battery against Stephanie by hiring someone to drug her, then the bachelorette party is where the crime was committed. But because he transports her over state lines now, he's subject to jurisdiction in the federal courts in Las Vegas. I guess you could sue him in Los Angeles because that's where it was revealed that the marriage happened. And so when you're subject to federal crimes like that, you'd have to look at the federal crimes code. But for an assault like that, I mean, each of those charges could carry anywhere from 5 years up to 25 or 30 years.
Or, okay, so like he'd be sentenced. The judge would say, Triple H, you're sentenced to 5 to 30 years, or you have to wrestle Test in a grudge match on SmackDown later this week. Is that usually how it goes in a court of law?
I'm telling you, I've been pushing for this as a way to actually resolve my cases in real life. Can we have grudge matches?
I mean, just think about that. Like I don't think he ever ends up wrestling Test one-on-one. However, he does wrestle Vince the next month at Armageddon in the main event.
Yeah.
And Vince hated this man so much, he could have easily just sent him to prison for 25 years. Instead,
right.
No, let's have a street fight.
Right. And it would have been federal prison nonetheless, which I'm not saying
ass prison, right?
Right. Federal pound me in the ass prison from Office Space. I think we're not talking about Martha Stewart crimes here. We're talking about him being in there with drug traffickers and, Pablo Escobar types.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how the game would have done there.
Now let's fast forward. Now let's say that Vince decided to press charges against Triple H.
Yeah.
They still end up having the street fight.
Yeah.
Stephanie decides to turn on her own father by handing over a sledgehammer to Triple H, who then assaults Vince with the sledgehammer. Several questions here. What happens to the case that is ongoing? And also, can you get away with the sledgehammer assault because it's in the confines of a wrestling match?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to talk about how this applies to all sports in general. There is a permissible level of contact that is allowed in sports that you consent to by participating in them. So as long as the contact is reasonable within the confines of the sport or activity itself, you would not be subject to liability. For instance, once you know it's a street fight and weapons are legal, Vince McMahon is essentially assuming the risk or consenting to that.
Ooh.
But here's an example. There are times when if you guys are big hockey fans or anyone's hockey fans out there, there have been situations where criminal charges have been filed against hockey players who have used equipment as instruments of criminality or weapons. So Marty McSorley hits someone in the head with his stick. Someone takes off
Happy Gilmore once stabbed a guy with a skate.
Yeah. So you can only consent to, and there's statutes in every state that actually shield you from liability for actions that happen within sports. So if you're playing football and I tackle you and you break your leg, you couldn't sue me because it's a legal tackle. But if I take something from off the field and I whack you in the back of the leg with it, that's not expected. So unfortunately, Vince wouldn't have any claims for the sledgehammer because that would be within the reasonable expectation of being involved in a street fight, especially knowing that Triple H uses a sledgehammer.
What about if you're from Pittsburgh and I'm from Cleveland and we're playing football and I take my helmet off or you take my helmet off and then I grab it back from you and then I hit you in the head with it?
Uh-huh. Has
where's
that happened before?
Oh. I mean, I'm a Cleveland fan here, but I don't think that I ever got behind Myles Garrett for that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do you think there, in all honesty, is there a charge that could have been brought against him?
Well, I mean, so the thing about criminal charges are that the criminal charges are not brought by the person that actually has the crime committed to them, it's brought by the state or the government.
Okay.
So that's why it's the people versus so-and-so whenever you have a criminal charge. Civilly, you could sue someone. So like Stephanie could have sued Triple H in addition to the criminal charges. She could have sued him civilly for fraud, for battery, basically whatever civil remedy she would have for her damages. Myles Garrett probably could have sued someone civilly for that. The question is whether any of the prosecutors would want to bring charges against the individual for, intent to injure with a deadly weapon or any type of weapon.
I feel like I've learned so much already.
You dropped so much knowledge on us today.
Well, and beside the fact that, once Stephanie McMahon turns on Vince McMahon now and shows that she was engaged in a conspiracy against her father that involved marriage, now she potentially invalidates her inheritance under his will.
Oh, no!
How fucking ridiculous does this sound? Like while he's saying it out loud.
I just that's why I wanted to do this, because
it's so
wrestling
good.
is so absurd. If you actually analyzed it in the confines of actual crimes and law, I figured it had to be absurd, and it is.
Well, it's my new favorite segment here.
And so Vince McMahon would have passed away, or we even talk about when the car gets blown up, right?
We'll get to that one day. We'll get to that one day.
There. Look, in insurance claims, okay, if you're the beneficiary of someone's life insurance policy and you kill that person, you have invalidated that life insurance policy, and you no longer can claim the benefits on that policy.
Wow.
But what if you pass away in a limo explosion, and then your daughter is supposed to inherit, let's just say half of the WWE, but she had turned against you previously, but then it's revealed that you really didn't die in a limo accident because Chris Benoit committed a murder in real life.
That's a subject for another.
We got so many other episodes.
Another segment.
We want to hear from the fans and see what they want to know about.
Yes, hey, if you guys have a particular subject that you want judged in the court of David Lawless for the segment Lawless in Order, let us know. I mean, there's so many that you could choose from. We figured Stephanie and Triple H would be a perfect spot to begin, but I feel like we can go on for hours and years.
Oh,
and we can go on forever.
Think about how many invasion of privacy claims people have for all the secret recordings that they've done.
GTV, anything that Sean Stasiak did in real life.
Oh, God. I don't want to talk about real life, though.
Then you had the whole Chuck and Billy trying to get married.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, was that ceremony conducted even in a state that recognizes gay marriage?
That's a fair point. And they really duped the Today Show. I mean, that was a very controversial thing. We got to talk about that one day. There's so many different.
The people have to let us know what they want next.
Yes.
Here's the one thing I'll say though, and this is one thing I forgot. I'm sorry. There's something else that I forgot.
Okay.
So once Stephanie and Triple H are married, once Stephanie reveals the fact that she was in on it and it is a valid marriage to Triple H, now she cannot be compelled to testify against her husband, and he cannot be compelled to testify against her because of spousal immunity.
Oh, shit. So he could get off, right?
Well, it's not that he could get off. She might not be permitted to testify against him in the criminal case.
I could get off.
Okay. Well, this man's never going to get a job with WWE. I'll tell you that. So,
he might not get another wife if he talks like this too.
He's trying.
I'll find a dirty one.
So, wow. I learned a lot today, and there's so much more to learn. But David, we got to tell people, your real name's not David Lawless.
My real name is not David Lawless. I know. This is the big reveal.
There's a crime against that somewhere.
Somewhere. Misleading. False advertising.
For sure. Well, tell everybody about your real name, your law firm, how they can find you.
My real name is Max Petrunya. That's Petrunya. You can find me online at maxpetrunyapc.com. I am a licensed attorney to practice in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. But if anyone out there in listening land has any questions or needs assistance with any legal matters, my contact information is on my website. You can actually shoot me an inquiry from the website itself. So maxpetrunyapc.com.
But hey, David, thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk with us for a little bit. And I know our fans appreciate it, and Aaron and I, we greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, gentlemen, and I look forward to more Lawless and Order segments on this podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.